Testing 1, 2, 3. Thanks. I don't, for some reason, I'm picking up some background noise, so I don't want it to be too loud, but I'll just talk more clear. Thanks. Perfect. All right. It's probably just going to be me and you today. Today I'm making EVA suits, whatever that stands for, environmental something, blah, blah, blah. Just, uh, spacesuits for people. So I got three different poses. I'm just going to work on them uh, roughly simultaneously, and then I'll cut them up at the end. So I have three different poses, but this is what I'm working on. Gonna start by doing a little sketching first. And I've got an image I'm looking at, though I'm not going to copy it directly. Extravehicular activity. Are you serious? Extravehicular. How? What is that? Does that mean just when you get outside of the vehicle, you can be active? In my reference picture, for some reason, they have glass in the back of the head, and I'm not sure why you would ever design a space helmet to have glass in the back of your head. So mine is just going to be metal back there, and the front can be glass. Huh. Well, you learn something new every day. I'm sure I could have found that online, but thank you for saving me the trouble. I guess with as much sci-fi as I've been watching, I probably should have picked up on that a lot sooner than now. All right, all right, that is. I think we can squeeze some of the arms in here. They're somewhat symmetrical up to this point. And hopefully I'm recording today. I did hit the record button before I hit the stream button, so it'd be really cool if I had a video to show at the end of this. Yeah, no, I get having the character's face has to be like you wouldn't have people running around in spacesuits if you couldn't see the guy's face. Um, but for some reason, these particular helmets have glass at the very back of your head, like, and it just makes no sense whatsoever, unless there's something I'm not taking into account. I mean, you can't turn your head that far around to even look out the back of your helmet, so it just seems like it'd be a huge safety issue. All right, symmetry off. Let's go ahead and I'm going to get rid of this arm. We'll move it over a little bit. I was watching sci-fi yesterday on Amazon and just went down a rabbit hole of really horrible sci-fi movies. And I have a pretty good tolerance for watching horrible stuff, so I continued to watch some of it. But there were a couple shows that I could not get past 15 minutes into. I mean, the quality was poor. I'm sure they were super low budget, but just the idea of some of them were just so horrible. I couldn't continue to watch them. And then I went back to watching Alien, because that's on HBO now, and those shows hold up pretty well. Let's see what we got here. A couple more bendies around the elbow, little ones. I might actually reinforce this. That looks cool. Send this down the outer edge. Today we may just get a lot of sketching. I'm going to be doing some finishing stuff here eventually, but um, the first hour may just be sketching, and I don't know if I'll record past the first hour. I may if I'm having a lot of success, but I doubt we get through all three of these guys today. If we get through one, I'll be pretty happy. I should probably bulk this up a little bit. It's a little bit too tight for an EVAsuit, so I'm going to draw on the outside of my lines here for a second and make everything just a little bit bulkier. A couple wrinkles. Alright. That's looking pretty good. Put a couple pouches on his hip down here. And finish up the front of his suit. I don't like that leg. This leg over here goes out at a really weird angle, and it again, if it looks just fine when you're actually looking at the actual model, it looks the way it would look. So I'll probably not do that leg, just do this leg and duplicate it and change it up a little bit. So this one's coming along fairly well. Now that I'm not being symmetrical, I can change up the front of this thing a little bit so that we have a couple different little access areas and a couple buttons. Always need buttons. Might be nice to have a little name tag here. Feeling kind of Bob Ross-ish. A little happy little name tag here so that we know who our astronaut is. I can't remember the names of those sci-fi movies I watched. They were basically whatever big name show that year was for sci-fi. They were just rip-offs of a slight variation of that name. I can't remember off the top of my head what they were, but um, they were not good. All right, let's see. I'm going to give these guys hands. I'm not going to give them the weapon because that'll change. So I'm just going to make this hand empty. The one that I thought was kind of funny as I was watching it uh, was it was a space one. It had something to do with the Bermuda Triangle being on the dark side of the moon. Um, but the thing that I thought was funniest about it was, and this will show my age, the main captain of the ship was someone who looked close enough to be Leslie Nielsen, and the second in command was blonde enough and pretty enough to be um, the co-pilot from Airplane. And so I just, as I was watching it, I just kept assuming that everything was going to go like just balls to the wall funny in that show because it just seemed like it was going to be like a space ripoff of Airplane. Um, it wasn't, unfortunately. I think it probably would have been a lot better had it been. Um, but it was just so hard to watch. All right, let's give this guy a couple rings around the wrist. Warren Dutter. I wish I spoke. Assuming that is. My languages are horrible. Maybe French. Nicholas. Okay. Yep. I know you. Hey, Nicholas. That's where I was headed after I saw the Nicholas, and I assumed it was French. And good to know. Hey, thanks for popping in. Yeah, I got your stuff. It's still in the queue. I'm a couple weeks behind on stuff, but when I forget what I told you when I would start it, but whatever time I said I would start it, I will definitely be starting your job. And then I just have to put them into a pack and sell them, but that's going to be a little bit trickier um, because I have to avoid any kind of IP problems with the DA franchise. So some of those may get changed a little bit. Some of them may be um, definitely named something completely different. I appreciate that. Yeah, your commands are really good. I really appreciate your patronage and the constant work. And even if that dries up sometime, like all the work I've done for you in the past has been great. So I appreciate it. Thank you. You're one of my, I would say, one of my better patrons. Of course, Silveressa is another patron um, who has provided plenty of work and help on my website. On my token blog, she's going to be writing every other week. She'll post some previews of some tokens and other things, which will help give me more of a voice on my site because I meant to post. I mean to post about once a month, and I post about twice a year, which is horrible. And I don't even think I've posted for 2020 yet. Talking and stuff is just not. It's not a high priority for me, and I'm typically not very good at it. So I tend not to do it, especially when there's work to do. If I can choose between promoting myself or just sitting down and making tokens, I'm always going to sit down and make tokens. All right, so let's get this guy some legs, and then we can start finishing up this first one. So legs, I think I'm going to give them a little bit more right there. Come out here. And the thighs have some electronics on them, but we're not going to see those. They fall into the wrong spot. But I will put a little bit of some reinforcement right through there. And knee pads. If you want to be a space person and you want to do a power slide against a steel hull of the ship, you got to have some kind of knee pad protection. Thanks. Yeah. The rat ones are generic enough that I don't have to worry about those, and a lot of your chaos ones ended up in the chaos pack, which was also great. Again, those are pretty generic, so I don't feel bad about doing that. The DA ones, of course, are going to be probably like I may release one of just all the paladins and the cleric ones and make that as some sort of like religious group pack or something like that. I don't know for sure. So yeah, those will find their way into a pack probably sooner than later. I can't. I have. In last year, I sat on so many tokens that I had finished, and then at the end of the year, I released 12 new packs. But I came to the conclusion that even though they weren't really done as well as I wanted them to be, like I just can't sit on 400 tokens and not be selling them, especially with sales. Sales have slowed down a little bit. I think maybe just because of the end of the year, people were watching their finances. But I think the bigger part is there's a lot more content to sift through if you're coming in for the first time and you're looking at stuff. There are a lot more people creating stuff, and a lot of people are creating really nice stuff. And it's just, at one time I was like the only guy in town selling tokens and stuff, and now a lot of people are, which is great. But it does mean sales are spread out between everybody. Plus, I think everybody who's buying my stuff usually stays pretty up to date. So I've released a ton of stuff, and at some point there's just going to be a saturation level where people just don't need to buy tokens all the time. And that's completely cool. Alright, so I'm going to flip this leg. I should just be able to flip horizontal. And it's super bright because it's on its new layer, and the new layer is set at 100%. So I'll dial that back to about the same level and move it over here. This guy's actually going to require a little bit of work, so move it off to the side. And we'll just get rid of this altogether. And now we can go back in and redraw this leg. And as far as this one goes, since I usually change legs up on from one side to the other, I'm actually going to erase most of that. And I'm going to cut this out because I don't need 2 feet. I've got 1 foot that I can copy to this side when I'm ready. The leg is going to be different, but the foot is the same. So I can just erase that. And now on this side, I can draw, whoops. So on this side, I can draw, I hope. What happened to my drawing ability? There we go. Nicholas, you're up in You're up in near Toronto, is that correct? Or somewhere in Canada? Oh, you're in France. Okay, that would definitely explain the French. I have a hard time keeping track of everybody and where they're at. I meant to ask you, and it's personal, so don't feel like obliged to answer this online. But I did mean to ask you at some point, like what you did for a living, um, because I know at some point, a lot of people want to buy tokens, but they can't because they can't afford it. But since you come back, time after time, I was curious if you're like pretty well established in France, if you're just younger but have the desire to buy tokens. Like I didn't know, and I'm always curious as to what the reasoning is between people buying tokens versus the people that just wait. Some of them try to get me to make entire packs for free, hoping that once it's done they can just buy it for $5. Whereas people like you are the real, like the people that get things done because you guys step up and actually buy entire packs, which people then later get to take advantage of. But um, like I said, I really appreciate the fact that some of you guys will actually step up and really, pay for the work to get done in the first place. Jan Luz, hey buddy. Wow, today's turned out to be a hell of a good day to. I wasn't even going to stream today because I feel like I'm behind, um, but this is awesome. I got three great patrons on here now, which for me, three is a huge number, so it's great. Jan, you are in Europe. Uh, Let me try to think if I can be more specific. I want to say Netherlands, maybe. Really, paying a French graphic designer's more expensive than paying me. Oh, that's cool. Awesome. Yeah, good guess. Like I was just saying to Warren Dutter, um, I had mistaken him. I thought he was from Canada, but he is in France. So I'm being very international today. Like I've got the United States, the Netherlands, and France watching me. That's actually really cool. I love the fact that because I'm horribly cultured. Like I don't travel as much as I wish I did. I'd love to see a lot of places. Um, it was really sad when we went to France. Like the weather was just a little bit cold and really not enough to keep us in our room the whole time. But my wife and my girls are not as adventurous as I am, and I probably should have gone out on my own to see more of France. But I don't know if maybe I'm not as adventurous as I want to be, or if it was just the timing. But I would love to come back to France sometime and see more of the country, especially just just winging it. Like we had like an agenda, and it was mostly for the girls and stuff. And we did the tour bus of France, which was cool. It was amazing to see all these places that I've seen in books and stuff. I didn't think I'd actually see up close, and it was really neat. But I would love to go back and actually get into some of the other places. I'd love to see the old armor and stuff, and the military um, museum and stuff. And none of that actually made it onto our list when we were there. But I'd love to see more of the world. Thank you. Next time I come to France, Nicholas, I will attempt to let you know in advance. And I may never get back there, but if I do, I will let you know because it would be great to meet you in person. And it would be great. We had a student from France stay with us for 3 weeks. And so we got to meet her family, and her family took us out to a wonderful dinner just like a block away from the Eiffel Tower. And it was probably the best night of the whole trip was just spending it with them and talking and stuff. And it was the best part of the trip was to actually have somebody that we knew in France that took the time to take us out to dinner. It was really great. All right, so I'm gonna move this one into place, and I'm gonna shorten this one. Jan, I saw. What were you working on? Were you working on orcs? Something you just posted on Twitter. I think it was orcs or something, but they were looking really good. Uh, I'm sure whatever is in Brittany would also be amazing. The guy that we had dinner with was originally grew up in Versailles, and he worked at the castle of Versailles as a groundskeeper for a while. And I told him that sounded phenomenal. Like having access to someone who knew about the castle and had spent a lot of time there would be amazing to go and just be part of that for like a day. This token is taking forever. This is why I don't talk and work because I can't do both. So I'm gonna trim off the top of this because it got to be a little bit too much, too complicated. I'm gonna throw this back over here. All right, that's better. And I think now that I look at this, I think this leg actually comes out a little bit too much. So I'm actually gonna trim off how much this leg actually comes out to the side. And I'm not sure exactly how I'm going to do it. I'll just do this. Whoops, wrong layer. Come over here, slide this over. I'll fix that up when I go into the final. All right, I think I've drawn enough, and we're already a half hour in, so let's go ahead and start doing a little finishing work. I usually start from the bottom, but in this case, I want to do the helmet first. So we're going to go back up to the helmet and brush and turn on my last use symmetry. Helmet should still be in the same place. So now I can create a new layer, which will be a final layer. I can call this one helmet. And I'll go get my inking brush, which is my preferred brush for line quality. And I'll rotate that. it's I'm sorry you call me master. It sounds funny, but I appreciate the compliment all the same. All right, so now even though I have my sketches in place and I will work a lot from the sketches, I am not necessarily focused on just whatever the sketch looks like. Um, a lot of times it's in my head a certain way anyway, so it's gonna change from the sketch to whatever the final is gonna be. And that line was no good. And that one's no good either. bad. I'm going to rotate this a little bit so I can get the right curve going on here. You guys can't tell, but I save. I hit the save button about every 5 minutes. Back in the day when I used to learn Photoshop, back in 95, 94, computers would crash a lot more. And so it was just pretty much part of the curriculum to save what you were working on about every 5 minutes. And I think Photoshop probably even has some save functionality built in to autosave, but I never trust it. It's just part of my... Every time I lift up my pen, I pretty much hit Command Save and then keep working. That's pretty good. Alright, now we have... And I'm just thinking ahead like how I'm going to make the glass, and I think the glass is going to have to be a separate layer, so I can change the opacity of that so I can drop different heads inside of it, and you'll still see through the glass, but the glass will create a little bit of a distortion on the face so you get the impression that there's something there. That'll be fun. So I think since we're looking down on this, I could put... This is really doing more than I really need to do, but I think we're going to have a little communication device inside of here, because there would be, maybe, it may be like on a little boom mic on their headset, but why not have one built into the actual helmet? Alright. So this back needs a little bit of work. Let's go ahead and we'll divide this up. It's just too much blank space. Light on the helmet. Might be able to get away with light on the inside of the helmet. Yeah, that'll be determined when I go to try to figure out how to put a head in this thing, and maybe that's what we'll do for the rest of this. Maybe I'll just focus on the helmet for this episode and see what we can do to make that actually work. So let's put a couple plates in here. Alright, that looks pretty good. Alright, so let's do that. Let's just focus on just the helmet. So, now that I have it drawn, I'm going to go ahead and we'll just turn off all this stuff for now and focus just on this guy. I will select that, create a white layer underneath it, so now I can turn that off. Alright, so the glass is going to be this, and that, this, and that, and this guy. Oh, actually I need to draw a little bit more to make this look right. I'm going to bring that out like that. There we go. Alright, back to making selections. So I want to select everything that the glass is going to sit over. Whoops. I'm going to have to come back in and get those separately. Alright, so I'll grab all these things. These things are all glass. And take my shift tool and go ahead and just add in all this. Alright, not sure what's going on with my shift tool all of a sudden. Probably because I wanted the lasso. There we go. Let's try that again. Down below, this part will also be underneath the glass, so I'm going to include it in the selection. Come over and grab this side real quick. Alright, so now I can come down here and do Command Option J, which is going to create a new layer. I'm going to call this glass. Alright, and so now just for right now, so I can keep things in track, I'm going to colorize this with a little bit of blue, just to get the idea that that's glass. And eventually that will be transparent, so I'll make it semi-transparent. And I'm going to go grab a head from an existing token. Let's go to token work and go to future tokens and characters. All right. This will be our head for today. I'll bring the hair with it just because it's contrasty. Close that other one, don't save, and I want to drop this behind everything else, get it the right size. And now this should have, oh, you know what, that's not going to show through because I still have the white behind it, so let's do this. Let's go back in here now. The glass is actually covering up the sides of the helmet, right here, 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 and here. But those are physical parts, so when I go to get rid of the actual glass so I have a transparent effect, I'm actually going to get rid of everything inside of there, but not those edges. Those edges should show up underneath the glass, but not be transparent. So I just need to grab these two areas, delete them from there. Okay. All right, now I've got that. I'm going to turn on my template real quick just to make sure I got the sizing about right for the head. I'm going to merge this down so it's just one layer and increase the size of this. Make it a little bit shorter perspective wise and then drop it in there. That looks pretty good. Okay. So now that I got that, now I can If I want to, I can play with the glass, um, determine how much I want it to interfere, which is very little. Um, if I want to put some sort of specular highlights in there, go to my brush and turn off symmetry. And by painting on a very light white color, it becomes even more transparent. That's good enough for now. Let's go ahead and finish this. And so let's just give this dark gray to start off with so we can really see what we're working with. The actual suit's mostly white, but a lot of white's not going to look good. It might look just fine. So let's just do a little shadowing real quick. I'm going to dial these things back a little bit once I get them in there, but just enough to give it a little bit of shape. There we go. And I'm using my favorite tools, dodge and burn, to just put in quick shadows and highlights. Okay, all right, that's a good start. So now I will actually brush in some actual detail. Color brush. So first things first, the inside's going to get darker, so we'll make that darker. And you can see the glass actually affects these things quite a bit. So I may have to come back in and adjust the glass on the sides so that these areas get much darker. Outside of the helmet should be more obvious. Alright, we're just going to make these things, let's turn my symmetry back on, make it go a little faster. Actually, let's inverse that. Let's make these things darker. I may have to go look at some seriously good sci-fi helmets to get an idea of how these lights should work. But for right now, I'm going to give them just a little bit of an outer glow. May not show up at all, but it works for now. Alright, so now I've got this done, but I also need to dial back. I'm going to dial back the glass even more. I need to paint the inside of the helmet, so it's going to be underneath the head. And this will be pretty dark, so I don't need to be very detailed about this. So what I can do is I'll start with black. And I will move that underneath the head. Put a stroke on here. Nope. Alright. Alright, so that's fairly good. The guy doesn't have any kind of headgear on underneath the helmet, but it might look nice in some cases to actually have him wearing a hood-like thing. So let's see if we can paint that in real quick. I'm just going to go ahead and add a stroke to this layer as I paint, so I don't have to draw it. Sometimes when I'm drawing stuff, I'll draw it all out. Sometimes when I'm drawing stuff, I will just simply allow it to create the outlines and stuff for me. Add a little shading to this guy back here. Alright, and I'm gonna fix this a little bit. Looks a little bit too much. There we go. Alright, so now that's something I can turn on and off depending on if I want him to look like he's wearing something underneath or not. Now if I'm going to do that, I might as well put a little bit of a boom mic on there so I can turn symmetry off and paint in a boom mic. Have that continue out into Alright, so this is just an extra layer I can turn on and off if I don't want him to wear it, or if he doesn't feel like wearing it that day. Alright, so let's see if we can do anything fancy with this glass. It may not work to do anything else. Hard light might work pretty good. That has a lot of blue tint to it, but it kind of works. Oh, you like the microphone? Good. Good, good, good. I will leave that in. I might have to put it on a separate layer so I can turn off the rest of his headgear and he'll still have the boom mic on. Just perfect. All right. All right, needs just a little bit more detail work on the helmet, and then we can try to get a little bit more done today, or I may just stop it after this and save more for later. All right, so let's go back and turn on symmetry. Let's go to nice bright white. Oops, wrong layer. And I don't like those, so let's get rid of those. All right. Symmetry off. I'm going to put a little bit of texture on here just so it's not too flat. This one's a little bit more scuffed up, which I like, but we'll make it more subtle. Go. All right, now I think that'll do for now for the helmet. So let's move on to the chest, because that was also symmetrical, so I can move through that pretty quick. So let's go ahead and turn on that. Turn on this. We'll create a new layer underneath everything else. Go grab my drawing inking brush. All right, let's try that. Jan, thanks for the idea. Let's go ahead and I'm just going to create a new layer and get a nice bright white. Oh, that's pretty good. I think just a little bit less. We'll go with that for now. I may come in and add another one, but that does look pretty good. Could probably get a nice soft eraser. Yeah, stick with that for now. Alrighty, so let's go ahead and draw some more. And call this one torso. Go back to a hard eraser. Let's go ahead and turn off all of that real quick. Oops. At some point I may want to, in fact we'll just do that now. Selection, paint layer. Put this underneath here. Now at some point the guy's going to want to take his helmet off. But we're still going to want to see everything that would be there without the helmet. So we will get rid of these layers. Alright, and so now I get to, this needs to be finished. And turn symmetry back on to speed things up a bit. I did not mean earlier to stop you guys from talking or asking questions. Feel free to do so anytime. I spend enough time by myself not talking, so if you guys have any questions or ideas, just throw them out there. Glad to listen to them. Alright, so this way if he's ever taken his helmet off, we get to see the rest of this. I'll put a little bit more detail in here now too, so this might be seen. I might make it, an entire group of guys that aren't wearing their actual helmets at the time. So let's do this. Let's put some banding in here. Thank you. Thanks, guys. I appreciate that. Alright, so now I've seen enough expanse that I know that there needs to be some kind of collar under here, so we'll just go ahead and draw that in. And never hurts to have all this stuff cleaned up anyway. Whoops. That was a happy accident. I might come back and add those back in. Those look pretty good. Everything on the right hand side is always darkened as if it's in shadow, because that's usually where my light source is almost always whoops. Yeah, the symmetry on that doesn't really help, does it? Um, my light source is almost always this way. So this is always going to be in shadow on this side. If you look at almost all my tokens, the chest or whatever's in that area will always have a shadow falling there, so that you get the impression that the head's poking up right there. Alright, so let's do just a little bit of highlight on the left hand side over here. Alright, good enough. Now, if we put the helmet back on, everything should still be good, and it is. And now at any time during the adventure, they can take off their helmet if they're inside. If they want to take off their cap, they can. Gotta finish just a little bit more back here. Okay. Alright, and now I can take the same kind of dirtiness that I added to the helmet. I can copy that. I can attach it to the chest piece, just so there's a little bit of texture there. And I can darken this just a little bit. And now I'll add the shadowed area down here, which I'm not liking. Shadowing really light areas is better when you choose the right tool settings. Right. And change that back. Go to my brush, get a gray, multiply it. And start to add some shadows. And we'll add some highlights. Little scuff marks. I think I will add a little stroke here so this sticks out a little bit better. There we go. Alright. So let's go ahead and do just a little bit more than I may call it a day, but cool. Let's do the torso. So no symmetry. Make sure symmetry is turned off. Get my drawing inking brush. Create a layer underneath everything else. And now it's just drawing. And for those of you that aren't familiar with my technique, a lot of times I just draw underneath stuff and it disappears, so that's fine. here. Can actually make my template a little bit lighter so I got more contrast in my lines. And now the hands are typically, when they're flesh, I draw them separately. Here they have gloves on, so I'm still debating whether or not to draw them on their own layer. And I think what I'll do is go ahead and just finish that arm off and draw the hands separately. So that way, if I want to change, is he shooting a pistol? Is he pointing? Is he just holding something? That way I can switch hands in and out. So I will draw the arms all the way up to the hands, and then the hands will have their own separate layer. Yeah, a lot of times when I talk about the way I work, I always, uh, I was never really an illustrator in the past until I became one. I always worked in production. I was always doing textbooks or large jobs where you would want to have to do something over and over and over. So I would always come up with devise ways to make production as easily uh, interchangeable as possible. So when I started making tokens and realized that's something I was probably going to be doing, the goal was to make it as effortless as possible. So the original idea was to have a huge library of just parts, torsos, legs, boots, and I would just, after the first year of making different pieces, I would be able to, like, any request that came in, I could just take those parts and build a new one. And it was supposed to be super simple, and I'd never really have to, do a whole lot of drawing after that first year or so. Um, but the problem is, I became such a fanatic on drawing individual tokens that even though I have these huge libraries of pieces, um, like legs and arms, like I still almost always draw everything from scratch, even though I have things that are extremely similar. Now the pulp 30s pulp ones I'm working on right now, every guy has a suit. So a lot of times I'm using the same suit, changing the color, and then changing the look of it just a little bit. But even then, like I'll draw the same suit 3 or 4 different times when I really don't need to, and it's just part of the way it's the way I work. Like I love to be able to grab pieces and parts from different things, and I love to have the interchangeability of tokens, but I also love to put a lot of unique detail into each token so that everyone feels like it's a different creature or a different character. So even though I could really streamline my work, I find I just enjoy doing it. And I think every year I do it, I think every year things get like a little bit nicer. So even stuff that I was super happy with a couple years ago, I may not draw it exactly the same now as I did, just a couple years ago. All right, those are the arms. Let's go ahead and just put some hands on a separate layer. Now, you can see the left hand. Um, this hand here is technically behind this sleeve, whereas this hand is in front of the sleeve. So in this case, I'll make 2 separate layers. If this is arms, then on one, I will make the upper hand. And the upper hand in this case just means the hand that is above the sleeves when you look at it. So you can see my arms are on a separate layer. Hands are right here, and they will just overlap slightly. And I got to remember that he's wearing gloves, so everything's going to be a little bit bulkier than it would if he wasn't wearing gloves. And I can throw a couple lines on here, which is nice because those lines will help tell the angle at which you're looking at things. So these fingers and a lot of that hand will disappear behind a gun, so it doesn't need to be very specific underneath there. Alright, so there's one hand, and what I'll do is I'll just turn off arms to make sure it's fully done, which it is. Alright, and now I can make a new layer that goes underneath, and this will be the lower hand. And because this one typically is covered up even more by the gun, really the only thing you need to suggest here is that there's a thumb, which I'll draw in case there's a really thin gun in place, and the trigger finger, which again we add these and because this goes underneath the arm, I can just finish it off underneath there, and you'll never see that. And close off the entire hand completely. Alright. Alright, now, typically I keep drawing, but let's go ahead and just go ahead and fill these in. And you can see there, the way my technique works is that everything I draw has to be completely closed off. So what I need to do is come up to my arms, and I need to finish drawing this all the way across. I can get rid of this line, even though it's not going to be seen. Get rid of that. Now I can select that, fill it with white, and turn on the upper hand, and fill it as well. Alright, so let's take the style that I've already established with the, by style I mean the pattern layer and the dirt and stuff, and we'll copy that, and we'll paste that onto all three layers. And I'm just going to turn everything else on since it doesn't really interfere. At this point, I would love to give the suit like a totally different color. Like I'd love to take the suit and make it really dark so that everything else stood out. But in the reference, and this is for a guy who wants them, everything's still pretty white. So we're just going to make it a little bit of a gray so that it's not stark white. I may come back in and hit some areas and make it really bright, but I think it'll look a little bit better if I can work on the gray. Alright, so typically what I'll do is I'll go in and throw in just really big shadows at first and just define the shape. Everything on this side's always mostly in shadow. Alrighty, yeah, this, the elbows aren't supposed to look this way, but I'm going to, actually, looking at the reference material, I can make this down here a color, which will be nice. So I'm going to make blue, I'm going to make a new layer, which I'll add blue to. And this is underneath the line work, but above the other color, above the other white. So I'm going to get a nice blue, something that's not horribly chromatic. And I can paint this underneath the line work. And if I'm clever, I can go to this and select it and then change that selection to be inverted. Go back. This way I can't color outside the lines on the edges, but I can on closer to the insides. Cool, Silveressa, thank you. I'll talk to you soon. almost done with this. Once I get this blue in place, then um, I'll show you how. Oops, that was not a happy accident. I'll show you guys how, and it's real easy, just how I make alternate variations in color, which is basically just by having all the color on this layer, I can just change the hue, saturation to create, variations. Now I will shade this so that it's consistent with everything else. Whoops. And somehow I got on the wrong layer. Oh, that sometimes happens. If I could get rid of the shading all the way back to before I started shading. Alright. Not quite as good, but what I can do is actually just go in and select all the blue. This was a much bigger happy accident. It's not even a happy accident. This was just a straight up accident. But I can salvage it. And Command Option J, we'll call this color suit. Alright, merge this one down. Alright, so it looks like I need to just fix this elbow over here. Or maybe not. Nope, I think I'm good. Okay. Alright, so now I'll go back and do the shading again, which I screwed up the first time. Oh, looks like I missed two more pieces. Yep. Alrighty, now I got the blue done. Okay. So now when I'm working, if the guy's wearing a different color suit or something, or he has different colors to differentiate him, I can just go into hue and saturation, and I can change the saturation, the lightness. If it just wants to go with maybe just a gray suit with some gray banding, we can switch it to that. Change different colors for different characters, different ranks or whatever. Oh, looks like I missed some more blue right there too. Alright, so let's cancel that. Let's go ahead and turn off this. Go back to the blue. Finish these little strips. Alright. I can turn this back on. Likewise, I can go to this layer if I really want to and change it up, but the blue stays consistent. So that's my main reason for working on various layers, so I can make variations relatively quickly without doing anything else. All right, the hands just need some shading, which I'll get to in a little bit. But um, I think for right now I'm going to call it a day as far as recording goes. Go get something to drink, rest my voice a little bit. If you guys are still there, I very much appreciate you guys showing up, and it was really fun talking to you. Um, I wish this had interactive speaking, so I could hear people instead of having to look down and try to read stuff. But I love the fact you guys showed up, and I love that you guys had some questions and were happy to watch. So thank you very much. And I may do this next week or 2 weeks from now. I'll do another one, and hopefully this one's recorded. So hopefully people will be able to watch this one on Twitch or some other place at a later time. But I do appreciate it. Thanks, guys. Have a great day or evening, since you guys are way ahead of us time wise.